Good afternoon. A swarthy Robbie Pack joins us today.
Good morning.
Medium. All right.
I see. I was going to ask if this is going to be two Tylers today, but we'll have
Just
to make
one?
do with one. Yeah.
Yeah, just one. So I had a question. We should probably do a release, right? Because it's been a little while since we've cut a crate, hasn't it? Yeah, we're due for a 31 with Ethan's changes, all the Data Fusion 52 things, with the exception of maybe this one, which is still in draft, but I'm not sure why. Can we cut a 31?
Probably.
Love the confidence.
Yeah. So there's one thing, and I don't know how to address this, and I don't know if this is an issue actually or not. I need to do a little more reviewing. But first, I need to find my browser window again.
It's over there.
Here we are.
There you go.
So,
do we actually have the cargo TOML changes that we need? No. All right. Well, I can at least do that.
All right.
Because we're talking like it's not gonna. It's a pretty big release, right? We wouldn't.
Yeah.
Go 31. Now I can show you why whenever anybody is like, hey, let's add another crate, or like, hey, let's do another major release, I can explain why it's a big, tedious pain in the ass. I can show you. That's everyone. I think every one of these I got to change. All right, 15 data catalog, blah, blah, blah. 31. Of course, this I have to change everything here. Everything's got to be incremented by 1.
Yeah.
Which is quite tedious.
Let me maybe say really quick what the question in my mind is. Let's put it that way.
Like an existential question?
Yes, like an existential question.
Okay. Kind of taking your time to get there. Like, oh no, are we breaking up, Robert?
Hopefully not.
Go on. Sorry.
One thing that I try to kind of religiously do in the new table provider, and this certainly also slows things down a bit, but is to get rid of the coupling between sessions and operators, kind of from the Data Fusion perspective, right? So right now we had a lot of cases where our operators, and with operators we mean kind of the scan, the delete, merge, whatever, has a reference to a log store or a Data Fusion session. Kind of when it comes to Data Fusion, this is sort of an anti-pattern. Not only is it an anti-pattern, kind of because the session, you only know what the session will be once you execute it. Because the session in many ways is kind of a physical thing as well, right? So there is a logical piece to it, and then there is kind of the execution piece to it. And only at execution time do you really know kind of what session do I want to execute this against. And as we've seen in our previous discussions, at least my personal view is that log store is our session,
Mhm.
or the closest we have to a session, because it carries resources and kind of contextual or some contextual information as well. So from that perspective, the table provider builder, for instance, now also can carry a reference to a session, which opens up again multiple code paths for an individual session, and we can end up again in a situation where the scan might use a different session than all the other operators in an operation, because we don't necessarily propagate that that session. And table provider is a logical node. It's not a physical node.
You say that with such emphasis, like I'm gonna really understand, and I appreciate that. These are just different logical node, physical node, data fusion things. Yes,
Yes.
that sit under logical plan, physical plan.
Yes.
Okay. Like, logical. Interesting. Yes. Yes, I also know what I'm doing. Okay.
And we introduce some of that coupling again, right? So the table provider builder can now track a session. We track a log store on the table provider as well.
Is there a pull request I can pull up that would highlight some of the challenge? Like, we've looked at the optimize operation before. Would this have some of that challenge that you're describing?
We can look in the commits. No, not on the PR, like on main. You can look on the commits in main.
Well, that's the case.
So there is add session handoff to table provider builder. Yeah, and there you see we add the session, and I don't know if I did that, but the log store reference is kind of the same thing. I don't know when that got there. I may have done that, but I kind of deliberately tried to keep this out of it. And the question is, okay, how do we get a log store then? There is a data fusion log store.
In our code base?
In our code base.
What's it called?
It's called, well, like I can, it's if you go to crates core source data fusion engine mod, I think. Source Delta Data Fusion engine. Damn it! I'm lying right now. That's no, I said Data Fusion log store, but that's not correct. We have a Data Fusion engine. I may have to well, maybe I need to have that in another code base. Because I definitely have something where we create a log store from a session. Because in many ways that's fairly straightforward. There was a bit of a challenge there because I needed to. Well, no, it can't be in our code base because we still have that. that if statement still on our code base.
If you have a place you're trying to send me, tell me. Where's it?
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
looking
Well,
at
so it's fairly straightforward to create a new log store from a session, because all you need is a root object store and a prefixed object store. So if you have the session and the URL, it's fairly straightforward to create one. The biggest thing that stopped me from log store with essentially, when you look at the default log store or log store with or whatever, right? So you don't need all that much. You need the root store. You can get that from the session. And so you need to have the location. The root store you can easily get from the session. The storage config, that's a bit of, well, we would need to track that somehow. But on the other hand, the thing we need from it is also not something we necessarily should be doing there. So essentially it carries this IO runtime thing, right? But when I think about how we integrate this with Data Fusion, whoever creates the session has full control on how they create the object stores. So the object stores may already be configured with an IO runtime or not. And it's hard for us to reason about what should or shouldn't be done in this case. Yeah. So other than that, though, we don't really need much of the other configuration, assuming that whoever set up the session already made choices for this kind of stuff, right? So what this means is we can create a log store from a root store and a URL. Fairly straightforward. Yeah, and my hope is that we would be able to do this within the Data Fusion nodes rather than tracking it on the struct.
So what you're saying kind of has me wanting to see if we were to drop log store entirely. Like if you were to remove that, like this thing does double duty. It acts as a session sort of, but it also, like for downstream storage providers, it's pretty load bearing. Like I think of our favorite LakeFS implementation, like it pretty heavily modifies some aspects of our operation.
Yeah. So
IO and the log, I don't know, like log store is doing double duty in that it does act, you're right, as a session is like carrying a lot of these properties through. And it's like, this is what is supposed to be done. But that's on the struct. On the implementation side, the log store trait leads to some pretty heavy customizations, which are kind of different.
That's absolutely right. So if you want to look at the issues really quick for Delta RS, yes.
I try not to, but
there is a DOP transaction pattern pinned on top.
Who keeps pinning these things up here?
I don't know. By the way, this is one of the if you scroll up, one of the first code excerpt that you see there is also a bit problematic in my sense. So as you say, Logstore is involved in the commits flow and quite load bearing. So right now we have, let's say, the DynamoDB way of doing things, in which case we path around, I think, a reference to a staged file. And then there is the I have copy if not exists or put if absent semantics. So what this does right now is saying, if you're not LakeFS store or default log store, then default to the DynamoDB way of doing things, which is, let's say, not the default. Also, kind of checking for names for this kind of behavior.
Oh, that's wacky.
Yeah, I mean, we need a better way to expose which way to follow and not hard code the implementation names, which also, let's say, disallows us of wrapping it in any way, shape, or form. And as you say,
there's some things that you are stating here which I don't agree with, and I'm thinking of a polite way to disagree with you on them.
Well, you don't have to be too polite. You can just
you
can just disagree.
Oh, well, in that case, okay, yeah. I do not believe that we should ever adopt the Delta kernel's right path. The direction that they're heading on is extremely complicated for very little benefit, in my opinion. But it doesn't add anything to Delta RS except a reliance on behaviors that we don't control, on a project that is not aligned with what the Delta RS user base is doing. And that's to say on the right path, not in general. Like there are other places where Delta kernel and Delta RS are in alignment, but for the right path, the motivations that are driving that are for one organization that has very particular wants and needs, which does not use LakeFS, which does not use GCP, which does not use, like, there's all of these things that I fundamentally don't believe are going to be addressed or made feasible in that right API. So if I look at our history with the read path, we have gotten worse. There's no fundamentally almost no way that you can say that Delta RS is massively better. We got like deletion vector support finally, which, I mean, you deserve a tremendous amount of credit for all of this work. But like from a performance standpoint or a stability standpoint, Delta RS has not improved because of this work with Delta kernel, which is not to say that Delta kernel is doing the wrong things, but like I fundamentally am rejecting the notion, and this is where I'm like, how do I say this politely? But I reject the notion that an intrinsic adoption of kernel improves Delta RS in a meaningful way. It can. There are cases where it can and it does, but it is not a given to me. And so our write code is complex, no doubt about it. There's like 4 different writers in Delta RS. But part of the reason for those 4 different writers is because it's because there's contact with the real world that's going on in this project with real users. And I like just using like the transaction API, I don't love in kernel. And I also think it is like the motivations are not to meet the needs of Delta RS users, which is fine, totally reasonable. But that means that they're building something which doesn't necessarily support what we have to do.
Yes. So just to clarify one thing really quick. So what I propose here is not to, at this point, use kernel. The like describe the solution you'd like, right? Essentially, what I'm saying is we should have a transaction abstraction on our end, and we can look at some of the kernel APIs if we like them or not. But we form a foundation, and it allows us to give feedback to the kernel project. But it explicitly, or I try to not say let's use Delta kernel
the part that I'm
transaction.
disagreeing, Robert, is there is a presumption here that the transaction API that they have is the correct direction. And I don't believe that to be the case.
That is something to be seen. What I do believe is that the coupling you mentioned before for LakeFS, for DynamoDB, that we can abstract stuff like this away by means of the concept of a transaction, right? And the transaction concept is not something that is specific to kernel. How we modify the transaction, what the transaction APIs look like, let's just kind of, okay, to be seen, TBD. But the concept of a transaction allows us to better hide some of the specifics, and the things that are really kind of tying concrete implementations to our code path, where we really shouldn't know much about these concrete implementations. We have like these custom execute handlers, yada, 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 right? So in several operations, you can pass in a custom execution handler, and LakeFS, I think, is the prime example, essentially giving a way to have hooks and a hook-like experience. So something you call into before performing a transaction.
So, and the hooks word, I think, is the important difference between how I see this evolving. Like from a Rust standpoint, I actually like, this is why I don't think the transaction concept work, like a trait or something that's going to implement that transaction API has to account for almost every phase. Like if you were to draw a state of flowchart of what a LakeFS commit looks like, or LakeFS rate, basically the transaction API, like the trait implementation, kind of has to have every state modeled there. And it's kind of like a never-ending thing, to where somebody comes along and says, like, we started with the DynamoDB thing, right? And like, okay, we need this. And then LakeFS came along and they need, we need a lot more. And so you end up with this very, like, for your worst case scenario, I'm not saying that LakeFS is bad, but like for your worst case scenario, your foundational API has to have something modeled for each of the worst case scenarios, or each step of that worst case scenario, in a way that makes it like it sort of punishes every other implementer or every other constituent in it of that trait. And so you said hooks. I actually like hooks and callbacks are something that we've not really done. The like prototype signatures, I may not be smart enough to implement, similar to like what we've done with features before. But like that is a way that I think if we have the ability for hooking that allows us to, like, a transaction API, I'm not opposed to a transaction API, but using a transaction API to model what something like LakeFS needs means that that transaction API has to have a step for everything that LakeFS needs. And if I don't care about LakeFS, that means I now have that cognitive load, that API is spread, right? Even if it's a no-op. That can lead to very confusing behavior. Like I would rather give LakeFS, as an example, a hook or a set of callbacks or something that's very, like, most people would never see it. Because for most most everybody, that's not the thing that we need.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. To not having kind of this specific stuff, but I believe this is exactly kind of if you search for, I think it's called custom execute handler or something.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
So every reference to
everybody's
this
punished with it. Yeah.
exists for one reason, so that LakeFS can do what it does. We have no other use case for this. It's only there so that some stuff can run, or that LakeFS can create this, and it permeates quite deep
Yuck.
into our code base, right?
Yeah.
And the same with kind of this if statement, right? So if LakeFS storage, blah blah blah, or default, this is just asking for things to go wrong. And everybody, whoever works,
and believe it or not, it does.
It does. And everybody who works on any operator really needs to reason about, when do I need to call this custom execute handler or not? And when do I need to explicitly invoke pre, post, whatever commit stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we already have a pretty complex state machine. If you look at our commit logic, like the commit implementation already is a pretty complex state machine.
Yes.
Oh
gosh, that's like one of the largest files we have.
Yeah. And it has this shortcut. But I feel a lot of this is exactly to accommodate kind of special cases. And I'm just hoping that we can kind of hide some of this, so that the specific implementations, since we've been saying LakeFS a lot, let's stick with it, can do whatever they need to do as you kind of initiate a transaction. Mm-hmm. And there is some added complexity here, because from a Delta perspective, it would be perfectly fine to let anybody write data files wherever they want, and then just start the transaction when we actually want to modify the log, right? But LakeFS also needs a dedicated object store when writing data. So, because it also, so essentially what happens is it creates this branch. This branch has a dedicated URL you need to use to write to that branch. And what that means is you have a dedicated log store to also write to that branch. Yeah. It's essentially this coupling that I'm hoping that we can kind of get rid of. And I feel
what if we just got rid of LakeFS? Don't tell Eon. What if we just deleted LakeFS?
Well, I mean, it would certainly resolve some of the need.
Okay, so let's.
And again, I did like the kernel approach to it, but what I like about it is we pass in actions as record batches. That's something I think it's worthwhile for us looking into.
But here, so I don't know. Part of the reason why I don't like the direction that is being pursued there is this code is ugly. This LakeFS code is ugly. Not because anybody wrote it to be ugly, because LakeFS is like a wildly different thing that somehow works in the Delta ecosystem. And so the kernel approach has typically been either if we abstract this problem hard enough, the complexity goes away, and we just are dealing in all these like ivory tower abstractions. So that's one version. And there is some utility in pulling things down into these abstractions. And then the other direction that has gone in is like, well, nobody should need to do that, so we won't support it. And so with something like LakeFS, because it's like such a bespoke thing, I don't think they will ever support anything close to it because it's so wild that you can't fit it into that like abstract to like philosophical principles, or it's in such a narrow use case that it won't be feasible. And so the escape hatch that frequently comes up with kernel is like, oh, well, just write an engine. Just for that sort of use case, you should just write an engine. And so like in my head, I'm thinking like, is the right, like, should LakeFS just have its own freaking engine? Like, that's insane. But like,
And
okay, so,
I mean,
so if we don't give it an engine, what does it have? Because it has to do like plumbing, and in Git ecosystem, they refer to porcelain and plumbing. So porcelain is what you interact with. So think your toilet. And then the plumbing is everything underneath that you don't see, right? And so LakeFS has to interact with the plumbing and the porcelain at the same time in a way that is so difficult to model that I don't know that it gets us out of this trying to model it.
Yeah. So I mean, what LakeFS would need to do here is if you scroll up to the code example.
Okay, good. This one?
Yeah. Well, we conveniently omit kind of the hard part.
Conveniently omit the hard part. Yes.
I mean,
I do that as well.
Ultimately, the transaction needs to become like a specialized scoped session because it needs to track resources like the object store and stuff like this for it to work well with kind of the likes of LakeFS. Because LakeFS needs to, for the duration of the transaction, replace a certain object store with another one, because the URLs themselves, they're not changing, right? Just what the object store underneath does and actually calls, that's changing. But from like a data fusion or any consumer's perspective, the URLs are still very much the same as they have been before. We just need to send them to a different, we just need to handle them differently once we're, as long as we're on the branch, right? And this is why essentially this transaction object needs to also carry resources and essentially implement a session in a way. Like, I don't know if you can get it to, or if you can get a void for it to implement the session trait. And this is where we may be able to wrap stuff, right? But what it essentially needs to do is customize what Data Fusion calls the runtime environment, which houses the object store registry and things like that. Yeah, and that's sort of the challenge here. But the ultimately the challenge is how can I better kind of expose some of those thoughts out there? Because
I'm gonna pull you back to earth real quick.
Yeah.
Do those thoughts need to be resolved before these two pull requests can be finished?
No, they're not those. We don't need them for those. I just need to figure out what the performance implications. I still, so we merged that thing with the delete. I still don't understand what's happening when, where, and how. like what we're fixing.
Oh man, we got some conflicts.
Yeah, I can resolve those, but we merged like this fix, and I don't know if we added, and I've been kind of offline a bit. If we go down a little bit, no, in the merged PRs, in the closed ones. If we go down further,
I'm happy for you to look on your computer too.
yes. Let me do that really quick. So pull request.
I mean, there's a few things that like that optimize operation and the right operation work that you had started. I'm really eager to get into the hands of people that would potentially be using it. Along with Florian's change, like we got to get a release out there. We've got a lot of code that's sort of like sitting in the wings that as soon as we get a release out there, we'll start to get some good feedback on things that we're not seeing right now.
Yeah.
So I actually wanted to. While I'm thinking of this.
So I found a PR, copy link.
Which, give me a number.
The number is 4150. So, and I haven't looked at the very latest comments, but I still don't know if we have like a repro example for whatever was happening. So there is two things going on, right? There's performance questions, but I wanted to look into kind of what are we actually fixing, because we're adding a bunch of logic on top, but I don't know why. I don't know what we're doing, what's changing, kind of, right? And I wasn't able to prove anything. Kind of, I wasn't able to create any failing tests that would indicate that stuff somehow behaves differently, which doesn't mean that there aren't any, right? Obviously, something was wrong, but I wasn't able to recreate that. Yeah.
Ethan seems to think it's fixed.
Yeah, but what is fixed? That's kind of the question I'm asking. We should be able to create a failing test that shows us what is fixed, right?
Do we not get a test in here?
Because, I mean, the metadata only stuff.
He created a test. I don't know if it was failing before his change, but there's tests here.
Yeah, but we have other tests. So metadata only scans already exist, right? And there are some tests that if you're not touching anything from the data files, then the regular scan will just fall back to doing a metadata only scan. So, and we didn't see any performance improvements, right? So metadata only is a pure performance thing. It has nothing to do with being correct or not correct. Or it may, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't understand what we were fixing, kind of.
I don't know either.
Is what I'm saying. And yeah, adding
I try not
a
to
bunch
ask
of code.
existential questions too often.
But yeah.
This is also all conflicted now.
Yeah, and for those, I really wanted to understand what, and this is also, and there I was just too late. It's my fault. Um,
Well, so let's step back from code for a second. Here's the state of Delta RS today. We have a bunch of shit shitting on the shelf, a bunch of shit sitting on the shelf that needs to be released. But we also have Eon, Florian, Robert, Tyler, and Ethan all actively working at the moment. And so part of the reason why I'm trying to like get a release out there and just get some stuff moving is because we actually have a lot of people willing to participate right now and willing to explore ideas and try things out. But we can't really do that effectively if we've got, 4 to 10,000 lines sitting in draft pull requests across the board, which is not to say like let's get these two specifically merged in. It's just we have a lot of stuff that's in flight, and
I agree. And so I think nothing is stopping us from getting a release out there, right? The thing that I think we need to do somehow is align on how do we want to move stuff forward, right? So, and that we're tracking log store on the Table provider or a session, it doesn't do things worse as we do it right now, right? It's essentially the same thing we're doing right now, but I try to not have this stuff, kind of our past mistakes, transferred over into what aim to be kind of sort of a cleaner state, right? So we're kind of repeating some past mistakes in new implementations, which I try to avoid. But like the challenge is how do we communicate? How do we make sure everybody agrees on? Because I can't also dictate this is what we should be doing. I feel like rationally there's good reasons, but others may have a better rationale, right? So I'm not saying my rationale is the right one, but ideally we would all agree and know what the rationale is for some of these decisions, kind of, right? And right now,
I don't actually think that's required. But we at least never let understanding stop us before.
So I'm not trying to revert some of the changes that others made, and I certainly don't want to communicate this. This is very valuable contributions, right? So I feel bad when I go in and try to essentially revert some of these valuable contributions because they don't fit my agenda. But I don't think it's not my agenda. Well,
the Robert Back agenda. So dramatic.
But we discussed kind of the lake effect. So there's reasoning behind why we want to get rid of this coupling, right? And where things should or shouldn't be done. That's kind of the main reasoning, I guess.
How silly is this? We have 2 versions of hash brown sitting in here. Oh right, I remember looking at this. Dash map just doesn't have an updated version of it. Designed code means almost nothing to me until it's actually in use. So everything that is unreleased it's depreciating in value. It has not produced anything of utility until it is released, until it is in the hands of people that are actually using it. And so I'm okay with messiness in our APIs, especially if we're changing. Like we can change things willy-nilly. Like, I don't really care. Most of our users are in Python anyways. Like, we can break the shit out of stuff if it suits our needs. But we have to get code out. And so I am much more comfortable philosophically with messy APIs if it is like a messy organic convergence on producing utility or improving performance or making things better in some, you know, measurable way. The mental model of Delta RS, this is why I say, like, understanding it has never stopped us before. But for most of my time working on this project, I've not fully understood everything that's been going on. Most things that touch data fusion, I don't really understand what's actually going on. I just know that when I hit the hammers on this part, it makes this sound, and that's what I'm looking for, and then it works, right? That's good enough for me. But it's got, like, as long as it's getting out. So, like, if you have particular, like, cutting down changes towards like this, like the optimized change as an example, that's pretty narrowly scoped. I mean, in like conceptually to me, right? Like, we're gonna change things for this operation and get it out and see what happens. That's compelling to me. I would rather do those things like one by one and just cut releases than try to get Eon, Florian, Ethan, Tyler, Steve, Robert in the same headspace, because I just don't think that's possible. Like, I don't think we're all going to have the same picture of the elephant at any point in time. And I think that's okay. Like, that's why we have automated tests.
Yeah. So agreed on the release stuff. Yeah, the thing that kind of makes it a little bit harder, that well, I don't know if it's like one step back, one step forward, or well, no, forward and backwards is bias language.
Yes, we're operating on a 360-degree coordinate plane.
Yes. So
it's okay.
Well, some patterns we have are kind of blocking making progress on some things, at least in my mind. And there is a dirty way of solving it and a clean way, and I try to follow the clean way. And I do get the point that that's not necessarily a good thing, but let's take the table provider implementation. If that thing then degrades to essentially doing the same thing the one before did, kind of embracing the same patterns that we try to get rid of, that makes stuff a little bit harder sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it needs to be out there, and I invested quite some work in trying to understand some of this stuff, or see where things are going wrong, essentially.
11, let's see. And I'm going through right now and just seeing if there's any major version bumps that we can get in, because I'm going to do this. So I was looking at was just cargo tree -d, which is going to show some dupes that we have in the tree. Smithy runtime didn't exist. I thought, like, part of my 110 is what we got. That's the latest there. Part of my urgency is, I mean, I've mentioned this to you and a couple of other people privately. Like, at work, I've not been able to deploy any Delta RS since last summer because the performance is poorer, and that's unacceptable. And so there's a tremendous amount of architectural changes and improvements that have happened that simply cannot go out in you know, my day job, because they don't have, like, they perform poor, and so, like, the fundamentals aren't there. And so when I look at some of the, like, I think it is important that we try to be thoughtful, but at the same time, if the things aren't paying the bills, then it doesn't matter how thoughtful we are.
Yeah, but just to be clear, right? I'm not saying we should be blocking any releases or anything on this. This is
I understand that.
Yeah.
But there's fixed energy. There's a fixed quantity of Robert time, Tyler time, Ethan time. And when we, I mean, like, let's not adopt any agile practices here, but if we were to adopt like a little bit of process, like the way that I think, if you look at like how Debian works as an example, there's like Debian testing and unstable, which is like where wacky shit happens, and then there's stable, like this is where we're, you know, a lot of energy goes into and where we're doing things, right? We don't really have a delineation, and I'm not saying we should. I'm not signing up for any more release engineering work than I already have. But like, there's like a TikTok that I think we should probably get into the habit of, which is like, you know, if we were to spend a month and say this month we're gonna be wild and crazy and like get all galaxy brain, the next month we come back and say like, all right, we'll close up the galaxy brain stuff. Let's look at issues. Let's look at, you know, performance. Let's look at like this in the real world, and then go back and forth. I think part of what's been challenging is when I look at some of the work that we've been doing is it's been both at the same time, and it is very difficult to merge those two, both like in a code base standpoint, but also just cognitively. It's hard to be experimental and production oriented simultaneously.
I agree. And kind of from that perspective, the removal of the current Delta table provider
105. Oof.
is very much something that I wanted to follow with cleaning up, getting rid of as much code as possible.
Hyper TLS. Will it work? It will not work. So what do you want to do next? We're coming towards the end of time. This is also here. The big clock is also here so that I remember, because sometimes I don't. Do you have a Databricks workspace like handy and ready to test?
Yes.
Not this one. I'm wondering if you might be able to reproduce this. So this is 4190. I haven't been able to spend the time really to reproduce it because I don't have like a ready-made Databricks workspace that I can use just for like my own personal screwing around. But basically, from a serverless, like SQL serverless or something else, and I've seen this in Catalog Explorer. So I've also seen this in, like, I have personally seen it where the like Delta, like an external table in Unity that is written to by Delta RS shows out of date or doesn't have the appropriate metadata. The hypothesis that these folks had was that it's because these CRC files are missing. I haven't been able to prove that, but it stands to reason. And I was wondering if like maybe you would be able to prove that. Like if you have a Delta RS writer that you can add as an external table in a Unity catalog for testing.
Yeah.
If you would be able to reproduce that.
I can certainly try.
Oh, Frank Portman said something. At Intel, or not Intel, Uber, competitive Intel. This is a funny question to me, actually, because with the SQL warehouses, you're whatever Databricks is pushing out. Like you basically, and I talked with I can't remember his name, one of the product managers about this long ago, and he's like, "How do you think we should handle releases?" I'm like, "Don't, like, just ship it." And so I helped really encourage the adoption of like current versus beta as like release channels for SQL serverless, and I think it's the right choice. But what that means is like there's no possible way to answer this question. Just like whatever whatever current means at this specific point in time.
Yeah, I think yes, I think
but I think that's correct. I think that is, from a service provider standpoint, I think that's correct. Okay, something is still pulling in multiple versions of this HTTP crate. That's what I was kind of hoping to avoid. Shoot. Oh, I'm going to keep screwing with this. I'm going to try to put all of these changes under this majorist release changes. Really, I would like to... I pinged Ian in Slack. I would like to get this parallel writers change through. Ethan's change, your test cases, like, here's what I would like to get merged. If you are able to optimize this or to resolve these conflicts, the reason I think we didn't merge this was because we had like random test failures. I'm curious if we still have those random test failures.
I mean, can you look in the PR really quick? What test failed?
I have that capability. 759.
Excellent.
Well, everything is.
Okay, there seems to be
No, I
something.
cannot.
But we should have previously. Yeah, so I think this is kind of the code itself did what it needed to do.
Well,
There
yeah,
was
if
just
you
kind of
resolve
the
this and it's
question
green,
around.
then
There was just a question around performance.
I don't care. I like optimize, as far as I'm concerned, is already too slow, too shitty. I don't care. Ian keeps asking for benchmarks, and he's not wrong in a lot of cases, but it puts a tremendous amount of pre-merge validation that is easily done after a release. So, like,
Yeah,
again,
and I mean, I created benchmarks with very unfavorable logs. So essentially just doing 500 commits. I don't know, no checkpoints, which I feel like is worst case performance for the new stuff. We have to stop. Yeah.
So from my perspective, this is not like, if this is green, I think we should merge it, and then the release is hopefully these 4 pull requests and this one. Like, I would like to get these in today to do a release. Either way, I would like to get a release out today so we can start to see what's going on.
The test cases one, I just need to resolve conflicts, but that is just test cases, right? So there should be no worries in merging that. All it does, worst case scenario is that it only covers.
Kumpel, das ist unsere Zeit. Dankeschön.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Same place next week.